My 25-year-old husband had an affair with a 45-year-old woman. I didn't make a scene. I quietly made sure he left with nothing, and he cried with regret. Ethan had a strange quirk, likely stemming from his father's early death and his mother remarrying. At 25, he was madly infatuated with Ava, who was 45. To always have her near, he hired Ava as his assistant. Within just a month, he even had Ava replace me as vice president. And when the flood hit, he abandoned both me and Eleanor, who had raised him since he was a child. Aurora, get out. He blamed Eleanor's death on me, throwing me out in the middle of the night and demanding a divorce. But when I was truly about to leave with my fiancé, he chased me all the way to the airport. His eyes were filled with despair and brokenness. Aurora, please don't leave. That was on the night of my birthday, our 2nd year of marriage. In's phone's recently deleted items, I found a video of him and Ava. My breath hitched for a moment when I saw the thumbnail of that recorded video. Ethan, oblivious, stood with his back to me, wearing an apron, serving the chicken stew he had cooked himself. It was a dish he always made for my birthday every year. Honey, just a little longer. He smiled warmly at me, and I mumbled a reply. Lowering my head, I tapped on the video. It was a recorded video call, 12 minutes long. The woman on the other end was displayed on the main screen. The woman was undressed, facing the camera. Ethan was on the picture-in-picture, his eyes captivated, the image slightly trembling. I closed my eyes, my palms trembling uncontrollably. The woman's abdomen had rolls of flesh and purplish stretch marks. I recognized her, Ava. My husband's new assistant, hired last month. Dinner's ready, honey. Ethan placed the chicken stew in front of me. The strong aroma filled my nostrils, and thinking of the video I'd just seen, I instinctively gagged. Honey, are you all right? You're so pale. Are you not feeling well? He gently stroked my face, sighing. If you're not feeling well, I'll have the family doctor come over to check on you. Our struggles are finally over. We're no longer the poor people who couldn't afford a large chicken stew. I lowered my eyes, silent. Yes. 5 years ago, Ethan and I squeezed into a 20-square-meter small studio apartment. Life was very tight back then. With a coupon, it was just enough for a small chicken stew with rice. I'd add an extra serving of rice, and it would come to exactly 20 yuan. Ethan would always hastily pick up a bit of cabbage and quickly finish his rice. Then he'd burp, and put all the meat onto my plate. Eat quickly, honey, or it'll all be gone. He smiled at me, revealing his canine teeth. But in the middle of the night, it was always him tossing and turning from hunger. Why are you crying? Ethan sighed softly, raising a hand to wipe the tears from my eyes. I came back to my senses and put a piece of meat into his bowl. Even after we started a company and lived in a luxury home 5 years later, he would still occasionally make a simple chicken stew himself. To commemorate the hard times we shared. Ethan's eyes were also red as he looked at me, picking up his chopsticks to eat. An urgent ringing broke the silence. Ethan saw Ava's name pop up and answered without hesitation. Ethan, my son has a stomachache, and his dad isn't here. I'm so scared. Ava's broken sobs on the other end tugged at Ethan's heart. He frowned and stood up. He got up and headed for the door. Ava, don't be scared. I'll be right there. He took a few steps to the door, then suddenly remembered me sitting at the dining table. He waved to me. Honey, I'll be right back. You eat well. I suppressed the lump in my throat. Go. Before I could finish speaking, he disappeared out the door. I lowered my eyes. The piece of meat I had just put on his plate had fallen onto the dining table and was now cold. I waited until 2 a.m. Morning, but Ethan never came back. This month, I had argued with him countless times because of Ava. Since he always took Ava's side, I no longer had the courage to call and press him. The next morning, I was woken by a frantic phone call. I instinctively reached beside me. It was still cold. He hadn't returned. I answered the phone. Ethan's voice on the other end was lighthearted. Honey, I thought about it all night. I'm afraid you're too exhausted, so you won't have to be the vice president anymore. Ethan had lost his father in childhood, and his family's company went bankrupt. The next year, his mother remarried. From then on, he was raised by Eleanor. His uncles started their own ventures, and no one helped him out. He got into the best high school in the city, but unable to afford tuition and fearing he'd burden Eleanor, he dropped out and went to a construction site. He toiled for 10 years at the construction site, then 5 years ago, he co-founded a company with me. 2 years ago, we got our marriage license. Actually, I didn't care about the vice president position. Anyone could hold that position, except for Ava. She was 45 and had only been with the company for a month, she was simply not qualified to be vice president. So, without a shred of hesitation, I immediately rejected Ethan's proposal. Why? He sounded a little disappointed on the other end. Honey, are you like those old-fashioned board members who look down on Ava? I didn't say anything. I hung up and drove straight to the company. Just as I stepped into the company building, Chloe, a longtime employee who had been there for 5 years, came out carrying a cardboard box. 2 other employees followed behind, comforting her. Chloe, feeling wronged, cried and cursed. All I said was that assistant was older and slow to react. Why am I being fired? I've been here since the company started. Mr. Ethan truly has no regard for loyalty. The 2 employees glanced cautiously at me and ADV. Ised her. Don't say another word. Everyone knows Mr. Ethan protects her. Why would you deliberately provoke him? I walked past them, entered the elevator, and went straight to the office. The door inside wasn't fully closed, and Ava's faint sobs could be heard through the crack. Maybe I really shouldn't be here, Ethan said with concern. Who said that? What would I do without you? My heart pounded. I steadied my breath and pushed open the door. My husband, Ethan, had his head buried deep in Ava's arms, like a child longing for his mother. My vision blurred, and I stumbled, grabbing the doorknob. Ava gasped, and the 2 quickly separated. Ethan, as if nothing had happened, maintained a normal expression and helped me to a seat. Honey, listen to me. When wanted to charm someone, he would speak softly, his eyes curved into a smile. The company is stable now, you don't need to worry about a thing. You can just help me keep Eleanor company, right? We've been married for 2 years now, we can also make time to try for a baby. His palm was warm as it covered my hand, but I felt only a chill deep inside. I was about to speak, but Ethan's tone suddenly turned cold. Even the board of directors can't interfere with my decisions. Aurora, can't you just be sensible? I met his gaze, there was no warmth in his eyes. I had seen that look 5 years ago, when he, thin and weak, was beaten by a construction site foreman and got up to retaliate with a brick. It was that exact look. I shivered and nodded weakly. How could I not know that Ethan, having climbed up from the bottom, was ruthless and stubborn to the core, always sticking to his word? All right then, Eleanor doesn't like the nursing home, so you can pick her up and bring her home. He put on a smile and patted my head, as if coaxing a puppy. I felt like a puppet, or a defeated general, slinking out of the office. From beginning to end, Ava didn't say a word. She just smiled faintly, looking askance at me. She knew. My husband would handle everything for her. Braving the heavy rain, I drove to the nursing home. The caregivers inside were in a panic. The elderly lady ran out. Ethan's Eleanor was 85, suffering from Alzheimer's, and had limited mobility. Where could she have gone? Knowing's importance to Ethan, I quickly dialed his phone number. The first time, he didn't answer. The second time, Ava answered. Ethan's in the shower, his phone is out here. She told me, a smile in her voice. But I clearly heard her echo on the phone, the pattering of the shower, and muffled, suppressed gasps. Tell that Eleanor is missing. I closed my eyes and hung up. The caregivers and I drove around the city for half an hour, then received a call from the firefighters. They said Eleanor was by the riverbanks, picking up driftwood that had floated downriver. When was abandoned by her children and struggled to survive with Ethan, she would go to the riverbanks during the rainy season to collect driftwood for firewood. Her memory was forever stuck in Ethan's childhood. My nose stung. When I rushed over, Eleanor was almost swept away by the murky river water. The firefighters couldn't stop her. I awkwardly waded into the water and, as I pulled Eleanor ashore, a dozen reporters rushed forward, snapping pictures frantically. Aurora, what are you doing? When a furious Ethan arrived, what he saw was me dragging Eleanor, forcing her to be photographed by reporters. He wrapped his jacket around a dazed Eleanor, then grabbed my collar and questioned me in a low voice. You can't even protect an elderly person. Are you intentionally trying to humiliate me? Our company has a good reputation in harmony. How can you lack even this common sense? I knew Ethan, who was insecure and cared about appearances, cared most about this, but the situation was urgent, and I didn't have time to think too much. I remained silent, my cold lips trembling incessantly. He glanced at my soaking wet body, a flick of concern in his eyes. And you, looking like this, have the nerve to dislike Ava. If she hadn't deduced that Eleanor was by the riverbanks, how could I have gotten here so quickly? Ava calmly patted Ethan's arm. It's all right, Ethan. Eleanor is what's important. Your wife didn't mean to. With just those 2 sentences, Ethan's expression softened. That's why I told you to step down from the vice president position and get some good rest. He put his arm around me and helped me into the car, taking Eleanor and me to the hospital. All the way there, Ava, sitting in the passenger seat, shared funny stories about her 2 sons with him. Ethan drove, listening patiently with his head tilted, his eyes curving into a smile from time to time. Oh, by the way, speaking of my 2 darlings. Ava frowned her delicate eyebrows. They should be getting out of school now, Ethan. I need to pick them up. She made a move to get out, but Ethan freed a hand to grab her. No, Ava, you don't drive, and with this heavy rain, it'll be hard to get a taxi. I'll take you. Ava looked at Eleanor and me in the back seat, troubled. But you need to take Eleanor to the hospital, and there's not enough room in the car for everyone. Ethan pulled over, met my gaze in the rearview mirror, and his eyes flickered. Honey, take a taxi and take Eleanor to the hospital. I'll be right there. Being left on the road by Ethan was something I hadn't expected. I stood outside, looking through the passenger window, feeling angry. Ethan, didn't you see the news just now? The river water is so high, it's about to flood the city. What about Eleanor? Ethan scratched his head, a bit agitated. I told you I'd come back. He drove away with Ava. He had no idea that half an hour later, he would lose his beloved Eleanor. At that time, Eleanor and I were in a taxi, still 500 meters from the city hospital. The intersection suddenly became jammed, and many people abandoned their cars and fled. From a distance, I saw the murky river water overflowing onto the road, carrying all sorts of trash and driftwood. Screams from the crowd swept past us. The road behind us was also blocked. The flood is here. The driver screamed and abandoned the taxi, fleeing. My limbs felt weak, and I instinctively grabbed Eleanor's hand. No, I need to wait for Ethan. Eleanor's Alzheimer's happened to worsen at that moment. She was incredibly stubborn. I couldn't pull her along no matter how hard I tried. Within just 2 minutes, the floodwaters quickly filled the taxi. Eleanor insisted on waiting for her grandson, so I had to force myself to stay calm and make a video call to Ethan. Ethan, the flood is here, come rescue us. Eleanor refuses to leave. The moment I saw Ethan in the video, I burst into uncontrollable sobs. Ethan's side was very noisy, he was driving, and Ava's 2 children in the back seat were screaming in fear. Ethan, what do we do? The camera captured half of Ava's face. She was tightly clinging to Ethan's arm in the passenger seat. Let's not go back. Can we take the children to a safe place first? I saw Ava's tears soaking his shirt sleeve in the video. Ethan. I felt a sense of despair, watching him grit his teeth in the video. Honey, you take Eleanor and run with the crowd first. I'll take the 2 children. He gave me a comforting look, then hung up the phone. I weakly lowered my phone, realizing the water had already reached my thighs. Water, water. Eleanor, realizing what was happening, finally climbed out of the taxi in a panic. I struggled to push aside the floating wood and trash, then helped Eleanor climb onto a van by the roadside. People on the 2nd floor by the window saw us and quickly reached out to pull us up, but had another episode, mumbling about looking for her grandson, and splashed into the floodwaters, deep enough to submerge an adult. Eleanor. I had just climbed onto the roof of the van and instinctively grabbed her, only to be pulled into the water with her. Later, the murky, bitter river water swept over my head, and I lost my grip on Eleanor's hand. When I regained consciousness, I found myself lying on a firefighter's rescue inflatable boat. Eleanor was also lying beside me, but she wasn't breathing, and the firefighters had covered her head with a jacket. I was terrified and filled with guilt, trembling uncontrollably. Eleanor was Ethan's only family. How would he look at me? Honey. To my despair, Ethan and his group arrived on another rescue boat. He leaned over to check if I had any injuries. Once he confirmed I wasn't hurt, he relaxed. Then, he saw a corner of a shirt sleeve peeking out from the body beside me, and his eyes narrowed. What happened to Eleanor? I couldn't speak. My mouth and nose were full of reeking mud and sand. Speak. Why are you crying? He shook my shoulders. Seeing I didn't answer, he gritted his teeth and pulled back the jacket covering Eleanor. Then, he broke down. Ethan, don't blame Aurora. In a critical moment, people instinctively look out for themselves first. It's human nature. Ava spoke lightly, placing the blame for Eleanor's death on me. I gritted my teeth, looking at her, and saw her wearing Ethan's jacket. Ava, at a time like this, are you still trying to stir up trouble between us? Rage and grief had already clouded my mind. I gritted my teeth and cursed. The next second, Ethan raised his arm and slapped my face hard. Aurora. That was my Eleanor. Ethan's eyes were red and swollen, and his gaze towards me was filled with hatred. I told you to take good care of Eleanor, how could you? He covered his face, breaking down. She was my only family. Nosebleed dripped onto my arm, and I haphazardly wiped it away. I instinctively explained, "No, Ethan, I didn't abandon Eleanor." Thinking of what had just happened, I cried as I spoke. The flood came too fiercely and too quickly. I even pushed Eleanor onto the roof of the van. But wasn't he listening to my explanation, completely despairing? "Aurora, you caused Eleanor's death. We are enemies for life. Once funeral arrangements are taken care of, we'll get a divorce." Later, when the floodwaters receded, I returned home in a daze. Eleanor was sent to the funeral home. Ethan was busy with her arrangements and paid no more attention to me. He just threw divorce papers at me. I hid in the bedroom, afraid to go out. Eleanor's memorial photo was outside, and I truly felt guilty towards her. And, seizing the opportunity, moved into the guest room with her 2 sons. Her reason was that her home had been flooded. The 2 children ran around outside, knocking over expensive vases and artwork, making noise all day. Then they vigorously knocked on my bedroom door. "Get out, murderer. Mommy says this is her room." The child kicked open the door, grabbing my hair and pulling hard. I looked up and saw Eleanor's memorial photo in the living room had been scribbled all over with red pen by the 2 children. Rage surged within me. I grabbed them by their collars and threw them into the pile of broken pottery in the living room. The children were scratched, bleeding all over the floor, and crying hysterically. Ava, who was helping a haggard Ethan into the house, nearly fainted when she saw her sons injured. "Aurora, what are you doing?" Ethan looked at me wearily, his eyes devoid of warmth. "You caused Eleanor's death. You should be grateful I haven't thrown you out. How dare you still bully 2 children?" I sneered, watching him pull Ava into his arms to comfort her. "Yes, I caused Eleanor's death and hurt your lover's children. What are you going to do about it?" I wiped away my silently flowing tears. Ethan's eyes glinted with coldness. He stepped forward, grabbed my neck, and gritted his teeth. "What nonsense are you talking about?" Gasping for air due to lack of oxygen, I struggled to throw the signed divorce papers in my hand at his face, sneering. "WH. Angry because you've been exposed? Do you want me to share your recorded video with Ava's husband?" I snatched Ethan's phone and found the video inside. Ava screamed, instinctively covering her children's eyes. "Aurora." Ethan's gaze was dark, as if he would devour me the next second. "Be good, give me back my phone." I shed tears as I opened his contacts. To get Ava to work at the company, Ethan had even arranged a warehouse manager job for her husband. "What, now you 2 know fear, do you?" I found Ava's husband's number and dialed it. "Ethan, what do we do? My husband will kill me." Ava pleaded with Ethan for help, her legs weak with fear. Ethan gritted his teeth. Before I could dial, he slapped the phone out of my hand and raised his arm. I lifted my head, looking straight into his eyes. He was stung by my gaze and didn't move for a long time. "What, are you going to hit me?" I sneered, trying to pretend I didn't care, but in the end, I choked back a sob and cursed. "Ethan, do you really think you're in love with Ava? You're just a child who lacked love growing up, merely seeking comfort from her." Ethan remained silent, looking at me coldly. I picked up Eleanor's memorial photo from the floor, which had been defaced with red pen, wiped it clean, and put it back on the table. "What kind of filial son are you pretending to be in front of Eleanor? If you hadn't abandoned us halfway, would Eleanor have died? You caused Eleanor's death." Ethan clenched his jaw, and after a moment, said hoarsely, "Aurora, get out. Ava, with her children, consoled him. Ethan, it's not your fault, it's not your mistake." Ethan gently brushed her hand away. He looked deeply at me, but I didn't notice any of that. I wiped away my tears and walked out of the luxury home with my head held high. "Ethan, I hope we never see each other again." The howling cold wind by the roadside made my head throb. I thought of the 10 years I had spent in harmony for Ethan. We had starved together. Been insulted with the harshest words by landlords for not being able to pay rent, and endured scorn from people at the construction site. But we eventually pulled through. I had thought Ethan and I were already family, woven into each other's very bones. I never imagined that I couldn't compare to a 45-year-old Ava. I laughed and cried, and finally, my vision went black, and I collapsed by the roadside. Before losing consciousness, I heard a long unheard rory in my ear. I never expected to see Julian in harmony, deep in the remote southwest. What was a playboy from Newport doing here? That was the first question I asked when I woke up in the hospital and saw him. Julian took off his mask, smiling nonchalantly. My old man didn't like what I was doing, and since Harmony was hit by a flood, he sent me here for some real-world experience. After speaking, Julian looked at me with a serious expression. Also, your old man asked me to bring you back. Your two older sisters died in a car accident last month. Now you're the He family's only daughter. Before wandering to Harmony, I was the youngest daughter of the He family in Newport. And the most invisible one. I had only seen Richard once, at Sarah's funeral. Richard had a vast family fortune, with several wives and 7 or 8 children. And getting pregnant with me was just an accident. Without acknowledgement, I was destined to be an illegitimate daughter, without a name or standing. That's why I came to distant Harmony and met Ethan, who shared a similar background. The year we founded the company, we were short on a lot of capital. I dialed Richard's number for the first time, begging for help, and received 60% of the company's startup funds. Ethan didn't know that the largest anonymous shareholder of the company was me. Julian snapped his fingers, pulling me back to reality. You must have seen the news about the upcoming marriage alliance between the Jiang and He families, right? I nodded. So your fiancé died, and you need me to fill in? Julian smiled casually. So, are you willing to take your late sister's place? I nodded without hesitation. This was my only chance to return to the He family, so I was definitely willing. As for love, it had long ceased to matter to me. Julian booked my flight for 3 days later. My phone buzzed, and I looked down. It was a message from Ethan, asking where I was. I didn't reply. On the other end, Ethan stood before Eleanor's memorial plaque, staring at his phone, a bit agitated. He hadn't failed to see Eleanor's memorial photo defaced last night. It was just that Ava was very compliant and sensible, scolding her children for a while right in front of him. He had no reason to scold someone else's children. Someone else's? He trembled slightly. Right. Subconsciously, no matter how much he clung to Ava, he still ultimately saw her as an outsider. Ethan remembered Aurora throwing the 2 children out of the master bedroom last night. Her face had been very cold then. He somewhat regretted agreeing to Ava's request to move into the master bedroom that morning. Now, listening to her 2 children making a ruckus in the master bedroom, Ethan felt annoyed. Why hadn't he completely deleted the recently deleted items from his photo gallery back then? He had always known about his strange fetish, so when he met Aurora, who was willing to endure hardships and stay by his side, he instinctively hid it well. Perhaps over the past 2 years, as the company grew, he had become complacent. In a moment of impulsive excitement, he made Ava his assistant and even promoted her to vice president. The more he thought about it, the angrier he got, and the more anxious he became as he didn't receive any news from Aurora. She had left last night, dressed so thinly. Ethan couldn't resist. He used his connections to find Aurora's location. She was in the hospital? His heart tightened. The dull pain he'd felt when he lost Eleanor unexpectedly surged back. So he quickly left and drove to the hospital. As Spoon fed me porridge, Ethan burst into the hospital room. Honey, are you all right? He stepped forward and instinctively took my hand. Where does your body hurt? Julian, holding the bowl of porridge, stepped aside, smiling disdainfully. She collapsed by the roadside and was almost found vulnerable. How could she be all right? Ethan turned back, saw the bowl of porridge Julian was holding, frowned, and politely asked, "Who are you?" Julian looked innocent, then chuckled. "Don't get the wrong idea. I'm just the doctor who brought her back last night." Ethan's tense body immediately relaxed. "Thank you for saving my wife last night. I'll send you a banner of appreciation another day." He thanked him simply. Hearing it, I couldn't help but sneer. "Ethan, are you dreaming? We signed the divorce papers last night. What right do you have to call me your wife?" Ethan pursed his lips and sighed helplessly. "Honey, are you still angry with me?" His eyes showed pain and helplessness. "My tone was bad last night, I apologize. Actually, I know Eleanor's death isn't your fault. The firefighters told me Eleanor dragged you into the water. We've relied on each other for so many years. As long as you can accept Ava, I can pretend nothing happened." Before he finished speaking, I couldn't help but raise my hand and slap his away. "Ethan, are you insane?" I looked at his astonished eyes and sneered. "You cheated on me with a 45-year-old woman, abandoned Eleanor and me for your momentary desires, and you still have the audacity to speak to me in such a condescending tone? Don't you feel any shame?" As listened to my words, his eyes flickered with anger. "Aurora, I considered you my only family. You don't need to insult me like this. In that case..." He gritted his teeth and roughly pulled me up. "We've signed the agreement now. Let's go to the Civil Affairs Bureau immediately to finalize the divorce." The needle in my hand was yanked out forcefully. I cried out in pain and lost my balance for a moment. Julian supported me, staring at Ethan with a cold expression. I gritted my teeth, reassuring Julian that I was fine, then met Ethan's gaze. What's the rush? I'll go with you right now. After we finalized the divorce papers, seeing me leave without a hint of hesitation, Ethan lost control and kicked his car tire. Then, he received news that a shareholders meeting was to be held. On the third day, Ethan arrived at the company with Ava, the vice president, and was surprised to see Julian and me in the conference room. How are you two together? He frowned, then quickly relaxed his expression. Right, I remember you have 3% of the company's shares. Arthur, the chairman, interrupted his murmuring. Last night, the anonymous shareholder suggested that Ava's vice president position be revoked. Let's take a vote. Others had long been dissatisfied with Ava, so they naturally agreed one after another. Only cast a dark glance at Mr. Arthur. Mr. Arthur, Ava was promoted by me. Why are you targeting her like this? Ava herself was terribly wronged, carefully clutching Ethan's shirt sleeve under the table. Arthur was startled, about to explain, when I spoke calmly. This matter has already been decided. Your opposition is useless. Anyway, Ava is no longer qualified to sit in this conference room. She can leave now. Ethan sneered. Aurora, what right does a minor shareholder like you have to speak? I stared at him silently. Arthur looked confused. Ms. Aurora is no minor shareholder. Besides that 3%, she holds the majority of the company's shares. Ethan froze for a moment, not processing it. What? Arthur understood, sitting up straight. It seems she never told you about this. We only found out half an hour before you arrived. Ethan stared at me, his mind racing, somewhat in disbelief. You hid this from me for 5 years, why? And where did you get so much money? Arthur saw I was disinclined to reply, so he offered reassurance. It doesn't matter. Anyway, Ms. Aurora will soon transfer all her shares to my name and leave Harmony. Ethan's heart sank again, and he instinctively asked me. Leave? Aurora, where are you going? Julian, sitting beside me, smiled casually. Of course, I'm going back to Newport with him for our wedding. His eyes held disdain as he looked at Ethan. Mr. Ethan, you must know about the upcoming marriage alliance between the Jiang and He families, right? Ethan naturally knew, but Aurora. He trembled all over, stood up, and pulled at me. Come on, step outside and explain this to me. I shook off his arm, sneering as I glanced at him. Explain what? Ethan, you still have something to deal with. Before he could react, a man burst through the door, grabbing Ava's hair and cursing. Bitch, you're sleeping around while I'm not home, aren't you? Ava was pulled off her chair by her husband, terrified, and cried out to Ethan for help. Ethan, help me. Ethan stood there frowning, then turned back to look at me. You sent the video to her husband? I looked up at him with a slight smile, which was an implicit confirmation. Ava's husband quickly slapped his wife twice, then pointed at Ethan and cursed. Mr. Ethan, I thought it was a good deal, a job paying $10,000 a month, but it turns out you were trying to seduce my wife. She could be your mother, aren't you disgusted? You have a young wife who loves you, but you abandon her to take my sloppy seconds? Ava's husband continued cursing relentlessly, without taking a breath. Several shareholders of the company watched, and employees outside were also peering in, enjoying the spectacle. Ava was still pleading with him for help. Ethan's face was darker than the bottom of a pot, veins bulging in his arms, as if he was about to fight Ava's husband any second. But suddenly, a feeling of disgust for Ava surged within him. He had initially relied on her because she was married with children and was around his mother's age, so he sought comfort from her. Now, Ava was causing him trouble, acting so uncouthly, completely unlike the infinitely nurturing maternal figure he envisioned, and he found her utterly uninteresting. Moreover, Aurora was leaving. Ethan had no mind to deal with the farce in front of him. He simply reached across the conference table towards me, his voice soft and coaxing. Honey, come home with me. I looked up. He had reverted to his formerly gentle demeanor. Seeing I didn't answer, he frowned slightly, intending to put his arm around my waist, but blocked his view. Mr. Ethan. He smiled subtly, but his eyes gleamed with a cold light. Rory needs to catch a flight with me, so please don't block our way. Ethan's face turned frighteningly grim, and he raised his hand, engaging Julian in a fight. The conference room erupted in chaos. Shareholders shook their heads and dodged the commotion. Ava was dragged away by her husband, wailing. I watched the scene unfold. Ethan had spent years on construction sites, so he was certainly ruthless with his hands. It looked like Julian was losing. I smashed a glass and angrily shouted, Ethan, that's enough. He stopped, breathing heavily, and looked at me with a frown. There was a cut on his chin. I pushed him away, helped Julian up, and examined the injuries on his face. "Come on, let's go to the airport." I helped him out of the conference room, not sparing Ethan a single glance. Ethan felt a desolation he had never experienced before. He recalled 5 years ago, when a foreman, taking advantage of his thin build, had beaten him for half an hour. He had beaten the foreman until his face was bloody, begging for mercy. Aurora, having heard the news from somewhere, had rushed all the way to the construction site. She cried sympathetically as she bandaged his wounds with gauze. Ethan still remembered her tear-filled eyes, how she choked back sobs asking if he was all right. But now, he looked at the empty conference room. His gentle, strong wife, who had endured so many years of hardship with him, had left. Ethan felt a sharp pain in his chest. Realizing what had happened, he staggered out of the conference room. "Aurora, come back." I never imagined Ethan would chase me all the way to the airport. The cut on his chin hadn't been bandaged, dripping and soaking his white shirt. "Honey, don't leave." Ethan lowered his head, holding my hand, his voice trembling. Over all these years, he had smiled at me, gotten angry, tried to please me, but he had never been this vulnerable. My mother remarried long ago and never cared about me. Those uncles and aunts only ever had cynical remarks. Eleanor, who raised me, is also gone. "Honey, you're my only family now. I only have you left." Ethan hoarsely pleaded, "I didn't mean to hurt you. It's just that I lacked love, I couldn't control myself, I thought you'd never leave." A bitter ache rose in my chest. I looked up at the sky, holding back my tears. Then, I forcefully pulled my hand back. "Ethan, 10 years of being by your side is enough. If I went back to you, you'd only hurt me again. The trauma you've carried since childhood is incredibly difficult to heal." Yes, I had tried. Years ago, even 10 years ago, during every day and night I spent with him, I understood Ethan's deep-seated issues. His life had been terrible. He was humiliated by his boss, starved, beaten, and bullied. He was a child with a sensitive and fragile heart, desperately in need of maternal love. I knew that. Because I was like that too. Our shared experiences fostered boundless compassion and understanding in me. We huddled together in the small studio apartment, nursing each other's inner wounds. But I'm not a savior. I turned, met Ethan's shattered, desperate gaze, and choked out, "Ethan, we are completely over." One last time, just as I used to comfort him in our small studio apartment, I raised my hand and stroked his head. Then, I turned and left. Ethan was held back by security, his voice hoarse as he called my name. We broke off contact forever after that day. Later, after I got off the plane, Julian took me back to the He family home, where I saw my frail, elderly Richard. This was only the second time I had seen my Richard, after a decade. Richard touched my brows and eyes, struggling to recall Sarah's appearance, attempting to bridge the slight distance between us. "I've allowed your mother's memorial plaque into the family mausoleum," he said. He sighed with a condescending air, seeking a hint of gratitude in my eyes. But I merely nodded with a smile. He didn't know that Sarah had never wanted to join this family. Before she died, she only desired freedom. She had also urged me to pursue what I truly desired. Now, what I desired was the He family's family assets, and their influence and power. So I obediently, yet with feigned casualness, inquired about the dowry Richard planned to give for the alliance with the Jeong family. I didn't notice Julian behind me, looking at my profile with a silent chuckle. The next day, Richard had the butler take me to see the 2 hotels transferred to my name. There were also 2 apartments in the city center, 2 commercial buildings, and equity in a bank. For me, this was more than enough. I would slowly leverage the He family's platform and network. After I returned to the He family home, the wedding date was put on the agenda, and naturally, the news spread throughout the media in Newport. Julian was handsome and refined, and as the heir to the conglomerate, it was inevitable he attracted a significant fan base. So, after we finished inspecting the hotel, fans and media swarmed forward, trapping us in place. "Mr. Julian, do you mind that your fiancé has been married before? It seems your family doesn't have a precedent for marrying someone who's been married before. How do your family members view this situation? Is your marriage with Ms. Aurora merely a marriage of convenience, one in name only, where you secretly lead separate lives?" Under the barrage of questions, Julian still smiled, answering in a calm and unhurried tone. "Whether it's Aurora's first or second marriage, it doesn't matter to me. My family doesn't care either. What matters to me is that she's returned to my side." He finished speaking and pulled me close by the waist. The crowd gasped, because he had said returned. I also froze for a second, so much so that I was still lost in thought when we got into the car later. accidentally grazing my knee. Julian helped me up, his eyes filled with worry and reproach. Rory, are you all right? It dawned on me. I remembered the days before I was 10, when Sarah and I lived in the He family home and hadn't been driven out. Julian always came to play in our yard, often pulling delicious candies from his pocket. Back then, he always called me Rory. It wasn't until the driver had driven a good distance from the hotel that a quiet Julian finally spoke in a low voice. What I just said in front of the media, it was all true. I responded with a wry laugh. I know. Regardless of whether it was true or false, it didn't matter to me. I looked out the window, but I could still feel a gentle, lingering gaze on me.